It was late at night, around 10 p.m., totally pitch black when I received a phone call. It was from Toton Mama, the medicine compounder at one of the GPs that my grandfather still works at. For the past week, I've been going to the chamber where my grandfather still practices at as an intern, so Toton Mama was still pretty well versed about my interests in the field of medicine. So the call came, and it was Toton Mama asking if I wanted to see how a saline drip was given to a patient. But he warned me, this was not going to be some ordinary saline drip journey. It was going to be one far from any seen at a place like a health center or a hospital. A certain term is used here in India. It's called jugaad, and it basically means you have to make do with the resources around you, while still getting the job done. It's not every time that every job can be done perhaps through the proper routes or the proper preparation, but at the end it must be complete, no matter what the task is. Much the same idea was applied to this saline drip journey. So while we traveled to the patient's house, let me explain to you the context of the patient. The patient had recently had severe diarrhea and as a result had become seriously dehydrated. This led to the patient barely being able to walk, talk, eat, and being very tired. So a pretty dire condition combined with an electrolyte imbalance. So it was pitch black, and the only thing that was visible was the headlights of the two dirt bikes that could be seen on the road. When we finally reached the patient's house, it was about as rural gets. The dirt roads were barely 1.5 meters wide, if that, and obviously no phone reception. But we got to work instantly. Here you can see Toton Mama unwrapping all of the components that we'll be needing to deliver this saline drip. First up, we've got the needle and the tubing. Next, we've got the 500 milliliter saline drip itself. To begin the drip, first we have to puncture it like this, with the needle provided with the tubing. The blue switch you see here is the controller, which allows for changing the rate of drip. Next up, I've got to hang this from the ceiling because we don't really have an IV stand. But that's what I said about jugaad in India. You've got to make do with the resources around you, and if you don't have an IV stand, well, you've got to find someplace else to hang the saline drip, and the ceiling seems to be a perfect fit. Here you can see me changing the rate of drip by moving the blue switch up or down. What you see here is the drip meter, where you can count how many drops of saline are falling per second, and then calculate the number of drips per minute. For reference, around 60 drips per minute is slow, 80 to 90 drips per minute is a good speed, and anything above 100 drips per minute is extremely fast, but may be used if the condition of the patient is very bad. It's also important to make sure that there are also no air bubbles or gaps in the tubing carrying the fluid, otherwise it can be a deadly condition for the heart. Next you'll see here is the tourniquet, which is being tied around the wrist to artificially increase the blood pressure, so it's easier to determine a good vein to inject the needle into. We inject into a vein because it leads to the heart, from where the saline will be distributed around the body rather than injecting into an artery. There's of course some wiping down with an antibacterial solution, and then finally we have the piercing of the needle into the skin. This is done using what's called a butterfly method. And then the tourniquet is released and the needle will be taped. Here I am essentially checking the level of the saline drip and also making sure that there's no leakage from where the needle is stuck into the saline drip bottle. I'm also checking the level and the rate of the drip, making sure that there's no overflow or the rate is not too quick. What I'm doing here is again checking the level of saline liquid in the drip meter. See, this level can tell you information or an indicator about how well the patient is taking in the liquid. So if there's a lot of liquid accumulation here, then you may need to reduce the drip level or rate. Or if there's no liquid accumulation, then maybe you need to increase the drip rate. What's also important to do is to puncture the saline bottle with a needle tip. This is to relieve the air pressure, allowing the drip to flow more freely. As you can see, the drip rate increased dramatically just because the air pressure has been relieved. Now what you see me get out of this medicine box is the MVI, in other words, multivitamin injection. So this will need to be opened. Now you'll see me opening the syringe through which I will use to inject the MVI into the saline drip bottle so that the MVI is spread all around his body rather than just in a specific place and distributed through his bloodstream. Now comes for the fun part, actually injecting it into the saline bottle. You can see the liquid turn a kind of misty yellow because that's the color of the multivitamin injection.